I think before we unpack a little bit about project management, let's talk about both of your ASME paths that led you to your volunteering roles. Elizabeth, you mentioned your involvement at the local level. So how did that bring you into more of a broader volunteering role?
Yeah, so shortly after graduation, I had moved to Oklahoma, and it was a new place without knowing a lot of people or having many connections. So I decided to reach out to the Central Oklahoma section and get to know some people there. And as is often the case with ASME, they quickly want to bring new people on to help lead in different areas. So I had joined the executive committee for that section. And then I had gotten involved with other early career opportunities throughout the society and ended up joining some of the, international committees and boards that were available.
Vikrant, what about you? How did you get to this moment in your ASME track?
Yeah, my path is also similar path. As we heard earlier, also I was in graduate school, and during graduate school, I was very busy in project works. So I used to participate lightly in the ASME events at the school. And after my graduation, I came to Detroit as a simulation engineer. And here I wanted to have some socialization. So I joined Detroit section as a member. And that's how I got introduced to ASME. And followed by that, I was participating in Eclipse program of ASME last year, during which I did a project with History and Heritage Committee. And I'm also member of the Verification and Validation Standards Committee. So that gives me something which I can do related to my field.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a broad exposure, I think, for the ASME organization at large that lets you then go back to your employer and say, look, here's what I've been able to be engaged with, which is, I think, a really great part of our organization. So for both of you, as we think about more of your project management experience, what have you learned, I guess, along the way? Any advice for maybe bumps in the road you didn't anticipate? And looking back now, you feel a little more qualified that you would have handled it differently if you had known. I'll start with Elizabeth on that one.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because over time you learn so much that sometimes you end up taking those things for granted that may have seemed kind of major at the time, but after a few years you have forgotten what those things were. I know for sure one thing when I first started my career is I was a little intimidated by older employees and even people who are my current age. So by looking back, I know that I really want younger employees to come to me and ask questions, and I'm always open to listening to anything they have to say and giving them advice and things like that. So I think one thing to know is, like, don't be intimidated by other employees that you work with. Don't be intimidated to reach out to vendors and other resources that you have and get help when you need help, because people are really willing to answer your questions.
That's great advice. I think especially opening the door to younger people allows them to contribute more in a way that they don't feel intimidated, and so you can probably get better ideas as a result. Vikrant, have you had a similar experience with that, or is there something different you would say when looking back at maybe yourself 10 years ago? What would you give yourself advice on that?
Yeah, I have a similar opinion, and learning with experience is very critical. So 10 years ago, I was working on, if I consider the projects which I was working on, now I have expertise in those topics, and I can also manage the projects with profitability. I've done projects on one of the subsystem called fuel evaporative emission subsystem extensively. I've worked as a project engineer, and now I'm also doing project management of those type of projects. And I can observe due to the experience, I can ensure there is timely deliverables, and also I can implement the complex technologies in a short time and ensure the profitability margin is also achieved for those projects.
That's great. So that's a really good segue to a question we have here in the chat, which is, what is one of the best project management tools that you think every engineer should know along their career? If it's in terms of organization or whatever you'd like to talk about, but how should our younger folks be thinking about once they do enter the workforce? What are some good tools they should be thinking about ahead of time? Elizabeth, why don't you start with that one?
All right. Well, I sort of feel like there isn't just one tool. I know even over my career, things have changed greatly. And so just being able to be willing to pick up new things and learn new things is really the tool that you need, because you might be in an organization that is very Excel driven and they do all their work and scheduling and everything in Excel, but a lot of organizations use smart sheets, or for an ASME project, we've been using Jira. So there's many different tools out there, and especially for me in the construction industry, for scheduling and things like that, we see a lot of companies that use Primavera. So there are many things out there, but as time goes forward, people find new things that work better. And I think just being able to roll with whatever comes up and learn the new tools and accept them and use them to the best of your ability is what really matters the most.
Right. So there's that adaptability that's, they don't teach you that necessarily, but that's something through experience that you've figured is a good tool. Vikrant, same question in terms of, general tools, either from the soft skills or actual tools that you use on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, the software tools, they can be varying from company to company, but there are some basics of the project management, like a Gantt chart. Um, those basics can be learned in school, in the projects which students are doing for their enterprise, for example, to divide the tasks into segments and distribute them to members of the project.
Excellent. And I guess I'm curious too, because we have some questions in the chat about your specific fields. How are you seeing maybe the next 5 years, if you're looking with a crystal ball? Of course, this year has introduced a lot of new questions for all of us, but would you say, in your experience at a project management level, are there going to be some pretty big changes that, again, will have to do with that adaptability so that you're able to learn as you go? Elizabeth, you want to field that one first?
Sure. Well, in my industry, we're sort of related heavily to construction and things like that, but also the live event industry. And of course, there aren't really any large scale live events going on right now. So we certainly know at some point, people will no longer be as concerned about COVID, or there will be a vaccine or something like that. And then suddenly the floodgates will open, and it will probably affect construction and other things, but there's going to suddenly be a high demand for things that have not been available for quite some time. And it's definitely going to be a tough thing for project management, because we're going to have so many demands and having to figure out how to prioritize things, looking at deadlines and figuring out how to accurately staff things and plan ahead to get all those things done that there's suddenly a high demand for.
Yeah, and certainly in an unprecedented way as well. Vikrant, same question. What do you anticipate will be the biggest change in your field, and specifically in the context of project management?
The biggest change will be the virtual format of work. Mostly you have to work virtually. You don't have in-person meetings. There are, in the simulation projects, we need to obtain data for modeling, to input the simulation models, and there can be a delay in availability of data. So we have to anticipate that as well. But overall, I don't see for my field there is much impact because of it, because it is more supported virtually, can be supported.
Gotcha. Yeah. We're seeing a question here now in the chat about goals. So can you both talk about, in your mind, and maybe it's changed over the years in your careers, is it better to have a constant goal, one that is consistent, that kind of guides you the whole time? Or is it better to, think more in a contingency way? So many different goals along the way. Elizabeth, we'll start with you on that. If you can talk about your thinking and maybe how it's evolved over time.
I think it's good to have some concrete goals in front of you, but I think this time has shown us more than any other time that we really need to be flexible and ready to take our skills from whatever we're using them now and then being able to apply them to other things. But I have had different skills in my that I've needed for work, and then for instance, having to develop more programming skills to have a goal to go through certain training and achieve certain certifications so that I can learn more about certain programming aspects and then apply it to the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that flexibility is really key right now. Vikrant, same question. How have your goals changed, or is there something specific that has stuck with you the whole time, even through all these different variations?
There is not much dynamics in the goals. It's having a concrete goal is good so that you can focus more on fulfilling those goals. So as when I was bachelor's, I was fascinated by automobiles. So I wanted to work on in that field. That was also a reason why I chose mechanical engineering. And later on, I joined Cummins diesel engine company in India. And there I got some good hands-on experience in working with diesel engines. During my graduate school, I focused on modeling and simulation. And since I had a good hands-on experience with physical systems, that was helpful because in simulations, you need to represent the physics in a simulation virtual environment. And then I learned coding languages like C programming, MATLAB during the school. These I was able to combine in my role at Siemens as a consultant in the simulation industry. And having the both physical physics-based hands-on experience of testing, engine dyno testing, and simulation, that was overall able to help me succeed in this field. And I worked with one automotive OEM for 5 years, so my goal was eventually fulfilled in that way. Primarily, I work on automotive subsystems.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's definitely a field that has shifted over the years as well. So as we're almost wrapping up in this session, I'd ask you both to. We have a question in the chat here about a situation that where you chose a field to work in, but later realized maybe it wasn't for you. So I think for our younger attendees, maybe we can say a lot of life is a process of elimination where you're figuring what works for you and what doesn't along the way. So for Elizabeth, we'll start with you. Were you ever in a situation in one of your career choices where you thought, oh boy, maybe this wasn't for me? And then how were you able to pivot or adapt? Do you have an answer for that?
I actually have not had a situation where I decided to move on because it wasn't a field that was interesting to me, because the audio video industry has been really interesting and dynamic to me and gives me a lot of opportunities to do a diverse amount of work. So I've just stuck with it. So maybe find the thing you really love to do first and keep going with it.
Do you think that in your experience with classmates over the years or colleagues you've talked with at ASME that is a rare situation where the first field you find is the one that you stick with, or are you finding that if you can make room in the field, it gives you a lot more options? How would you contextualize your experience with others?
I've seen a combination of both, where there are some people that do stay either in the same industry or with the same job for a while, but definitely the trend is right now that people typically bounce around between jobs, definitely, and possibly different industries. So that goes back to that adaptability and being able to learn skills that apply to various areas so that you can transition better between different areas.
Yeah, for sure. Vikrant, what are your thoughts on that in terms of either transitioning within one field or having the skills to pop into several?
I have a positive experience in that terms. I never thought that this is not a field or this is not a topic which I'm not interested in. So, but I will often come across projects where there is a very steep learning curve. Like I did a project for brake system modeling, and I had a good sound modeling background, but I didn't have much knowledge of brake system. And within 3 months, I had to create a good simulation model. So in this scenario, it is also helpful to collaborate with others who are familiar with that technology. So I was able to collaborate with a design and release engineer of the brakes in the company, and he brought the knowledge of the brake system, and I was able to contribute in the simulation of the brakes, and it was successfully done. So it's always good to seek information from others within the company or from research of papers. That is helpful.